Thank you so much for your time today, Tessa. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you about Temptation of the Force. I have been so excited for this book.
Of course, I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about the book, and I haven't been able to until basically today. So
Yeah.
it's great. There's so many things going on that I'm eager to discuss and like argue about. So I'm a big arguer.
I love that. I love that. Well, maybe we'll get some good
Yeah.
spirited debate going. And most people watching this video will probably know you for your numerous contributions to the High Republic now. Most recently, you co-wrote Defy the Storm with Justina Ireland, the wonderful Justina Ireland. You also
Yes.
co-wrote you also co-wrote probably my favorite book that I read last year, Path of Deceit. I could not put that down.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of that later on.
Sure.
And of course, you wrote the New York Times bestseller, Quest for Planet X, the Phase 2 as
That's
well.
right. Yeah.
Just
sweet little babies.
Just so many fabulous contributions to the galaxy far, far away. And A Closed Fist Has No Claws, and outside of the High Republic as well, masters in stories of Jedi and Sith. And very soon,
That's right,
we'll have the latest High Republic novel to take us forward in Phase 3, Temptation of the Force. And I really can't wait to. I'm about halfway through the book at the moment. Loved every page so far, and I've been so excited for this book.
Thank you. It's a lot.
Yeah. I've actually just read, just before we got into this interview, Charles Soule's newsletter today, where he talks about his thoughts on the book, and him like talking about how that feeds into Trials of a Jedi, and so yeah, it's just incredible. The High Republic is easily one of my favorite parts of Star Wars now. It's just so nice to get that diversity of characters, of thought, of perception. And yeah, I really appreciate talking with you because you brought that to life.
Oh, I'm really glad. It is I mean, it's a little bit like, I don't know. I'm not sure I should say this, but the High Republic is also among my favorite Star Wars things. Not just because I write for it, but also, you know, I've always loved the Jedi. And, you know, when I was young, all we had were the original trilogy and then books. I read basically all of the Legends books that came out until like the late 90s or something, when I was in college and grad school and too busy to read for fun. But you know, I always wanted more about the Jedi specifically. And so being able to read and then now participate in like creating what the Jedi were like at the height of their glory, so to speak, has been just so much fun. And I love it. I love space wizards.
Oh, it must be so fantastic to bring all of these wonderful things to life. And in this book, it's been a year since Starlight Beacon fell. So we've had some big shifts in the galaxy far, far away. And many characters that we know and love, many of which appear in Temptation of the Force, have undergone drastic changes in their characteristics, their personality, their perception of the galaxy and their responsibilities in a relatively short period of time since we first met them in Light of a Jedi. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this era of the Star Wars galaxy is how the Jedi Order seem generally more open and accepting to different perceptions and how Jedi interact with the Force. That, like, that's a value that I really hold dear to my heart in just everyday life. So seeing that represented in Star Wars is incredible. And I think that contrast with what we see in the Jedi Order, that more dogmatic approach in the prequel trilogy, I find really interesting. For me, I feel like that kind of contrast between where we see the Jedi Order in the High Republic and the prequel trilogy is most exemplified by Jedi Master Elzar Mann and his more rebellious nature, that experimental tendency to how he approaches the Force and uses it. And obviously, in recent history in the High Republic, he's had a bit of a turbulent time. He tapped into the dark side on Ballo. He murdered Chancey Yarrow in cold blood, which led to the fall of Starlight Beacon and the death of his best friend Stellan, and so many other people. And also him blaming himself for that failure to breach the storm wall in Eye of Darkness by George Mann. How does this continue to play out into Elzar's character, that kind of feeling of guilt and that absence of Stellan?
Well, like you mentioned, everyone is traumatized in this book. Every single main character, everyone with a point of view has been through trauma, even Markian. But with Elzar, one of the things I've always been drawn to about his character, even before I knew I would be writing him, was that, you know, he has always pushed the boundaries. Like, that was part of his characterization in the very beginning. You know, that he does that. He pushes at the edges of things like, are we allowed to do this? Are we not allowed to do this? Well, I'm going to try. You know, better to you know, apologize than ask permission is, you know, at least used to be like the Elzar Mann way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, all the ways that hasn't worked out for him, but also, you know, he has been trying and grappling with his own flaws, so to speak, also for the whole time that we've seen him in phase one. You know, it's never like he was never presented as, you know, the best Jedi. He was good, but you know, he was lagging behind his best friends and like becoming a master because of all these things he's always struggled with. And so I think that makes him more relatable in a certain way because he's always struggled. And you know, deep down, I don't think Elzar really understands why he's not supposed to have extreme feelings.
Yeah.
You know, and even though he knows like the dogma, he doesn't feel that. He doesn't live that. And you know, I think part of one of the core flaws of the Jedi Order, even now, which we see like to come to really tragic fruition by the prequel trilogies, is that there's no avenue for him to learn, because it's just like, no, you don't have attachments. And, you know, we can do a bunch of other stuff, but no, you don't have attachments. Like, there's not, I assume, you know, a class for the younglings specifically about, are you having trouble with forming attachments? Let's talk about, you know, like all the different ways that we can appreciate this and live our lives and have friends and care about things without forming, you know, like, so I think that that is something that it's always been like the promise, you know, the promise of Elzar's character is to really show why the Jedi are bad at this, actually. You know, for all the things they're very good at, they are bad at emotions, and they always have been. It's like built into the structure and the philosophy of how they interact with the Force. Yeah. So I have a lot of opinions about this, obviously, going all the way back to writing Path of Deceit, where my favorite scenes to write were the conversations between Marta and Kevmo when they were basically arguing, having these like philosophical arguments about the Force and how it should or shouldn't be used, and everything. So yeah, Elzar, I don't actually think is in the worst emotional place of all of the main characters of Temptation of the Force, though. I think that, you know, partly because he's older and has been dealing with this for a long time and is at the point where he knows what he needs. He knows he needs help. He knows what to do next. He just has to like do it. I actually think that Buryaga is in the worst like emotional place of everyone at the
Okay.
very beginning of Temptation because of what happened to him on Starlight and
Yeah.
then in the immediate aftermath of Starlight Beacon
Mm.
falling.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
definitely. No, but that's really interesting when you mentioned about that kind of struggle that Elzar feels to kind of keep up with, especially like the
Hmm.
Firebrands, like Avar
Right.
and Stellan, like the
Hmm.
golden children of the Jedi at this time.
Right.
And that had never really dawned on me actually until I read Defy the Storm when Benestra brings it up in her internal monologue, where she's like, "No, actually, he probably is like he's not quite Avar or Stellan." Do you
Uh-huh.
think that there is a conflict in Elzar's mind between the person that Stellan thinks Elzar should be or could be, and actually who he is?
Yes. I also think that Elzar, particularly in everything post Starlight,
Mm.
has sort of recreated who Stellan was in his own head.
Mhm.
Because of his immense guilt, he's really, in a place where he's, when he compares himself to Stellan, he's not even comparing himself to who Stellan really was. He's comparing him to this idealized version, because that's what we do when someone we love dies, even in like very normal, non-traumatic situations. We tend to want to remember the good things, and when you're in the situation like Elzar is in, of course he's like, oh, Stellan would never have made these mistakes. Stellan knew better. Stellan was better at everything. Stellan could have done this. Stellan in a lot of ways. And so I think that is where the conflict really comes from,
Right.
between who Elzar really is and who he thinks Stellan wanted him to be.
I see that because like reading through Eye of Darkness and
Mm-hmm.
even like towards the end of Defy the Storm and the beginning
Yeah.
of Temptation of the Force, I do think you see that. You see Elzar's perception of Stellan,
Right.
who Stellan was to Elzar, and
Mm-hmm.
we could go to really deep levels in terms of perception. But I find that really interesting. And we've got the other firebrand as well
Yeah.
in this trio. We've got Avar, and Elzar expressed his feelings and confessed what he felt guilty about to Avar, who then effectively left him after Starlight fell and
Mm-hmm.
was behind the storm wall for a year. And how does that play out after they've spent a year apart? Because we know how passionate Elzar is about Avar and always has been, always will
Yeah.
be, I'm presuming. But is there any hints or any feelings of abandonment at all on his part?
I don't think that Elzar feels abandoned. I think that he feels like he deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that he, and George really did such an incredible job setting me up for Temptation with all of the character work he did with Elzar and Avar in Eye of Darkness, like showing who they were apart and,
Yeah.
their longing that was not just like personal longing, but like, professional makes it sound weird, but, um, on all different levels,
Yeah.
they longed for each other because they know on a certain level what has always, maybe the only thing that has always worked between them is that they make each other better Jedi. And so I think that Elzar didn't feel abandoned so much as Avar left because I don't deserve for her to have stayed. The things I've done now, I'm no longer on the level with her. So, now I'm alone and I need to earn that back. I have to earn the right to stand at Avar's side again.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I really can see that. And I think that's really interesting because speaking of Elzar's guilt, when I read The Fallen Star and when Elzar murdered Chancey Yarrow in cold blood right at the end, I mean, first of all, shock of the century. I was not expecting that. But like instantly, it reminded me of the scene in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin beheads Count Dooku. And then it made me think about how many similarities there actually are between Anakin and Elzar. His emotional side, his love for Avar, although it's not forbidden in this era, it's still a point of tension between the two of them. And obviously we've got comparisons to Anakin and Padme tapping into the dark side. Did you draw any connections between those two characters whilst you were writing for Elzar?
I definitely did, partly because that was my assignment in writing the book, was to write a Jedi love story. And of course, the only like Jedi love story that we've, and the only thing that could really be called that is Anakin and Padme. That obviously went very badly for a lot of different reasons. So many. We could be here all day. I was kind of supposed to. And, that is like it being part of the point. But, since this is the High Republic and this is when the Jedi were, supposedly at the height of their achievements, when they're doing, great things and mostly managed to, stay on target when it comes to light and justice. I really got to explore, well, what is a Jedi love story when the Jedi Order isn't broken? Because it is already broken in the prequel trilogies. Even before The Phantom Menace, it's broken. It's not broken now. It has its, flaws and cracks and things, but it is very functional and will be very functional for, at least a few more generations. Really getting to explore an Anakin-like character when he does have support. He does have people around him, including the Jedi Council, who, without spoilers, Elzar at one point in the book has a conversation with one of the members of the council, basically asking, like, this is a silly way to say it, but like basically asking permission to make out with his girlfriend. He's basically like, okay, I'm struggling with this. You know what I should do? I should talk to one of my elders, to someone wiser than me. And he's not rejected for it. Anakin did not have that choice. Anakin didn't get it. Why it would, he just couldn't, because he knew what the answer would be. But, here Elzar gets to, be like, hey, so this is a thing I'm struggling with, and then have a really useful, interesting, I hope, hopeful conversation about love and the Force and the Jedi and how it all works in a much more nurturing way, I think. And so, in a lot of ways, I think that the success, I don't think it's a success or a spoiler, too much of a spoiler, to say that, Elzar is, at least for the time being, much more successful than Anakin at navigating this. And I think it's because of when this is taking place and the fact that he has a support system and he actually uses it, which is something that he has really struggled with in the past, is actually going and asking for help when he needs help with something, and then hiding away. And especially because, he tries to do that with Avar. And then, like you said, she leaves for her own reasons. And so it was really interesting and complicated to play with such a messy guy.
I love that. And it really sounds like you had that degradation of the Jedi Order and some of their values, and we talked about the dogma of the council a little bit already. It sounds like you had that very much in mind in writing this novel. I feel like we're beginning to see that with Phase 3. We're beginning to see that shift. because of everything that's happened with the Nile. It sounds like that was something you consciously thought of as you were writing.
Definitely. It's one of like my biggest beefs with the Jedi for, 30 years is I just think it's no attachments is a really bad philosophy. So
Yeah.
it always has been, always will be. And so this was a really easy way for me to start like writing, some of the nuance of, well, maybe this is one of the things that went wrong really early on.
No, I love that. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, if Anakin had been around in this time, we would have a very different story in the Skywalker saga. Like, that nurturing element is definitely something that he would have benefited from. And as we're beginning to see that shift in the kind of mentality of the Jedi Order in this time, how does that impact some of the Jedi characters, especially people like Elzar?
I think that everyone at this point in phase 3, everyone is struggling with everything. So I don't really think that it has a lot of overt, like immediate effect on the characters because everybody is like, we just have to survive this and we have to figure out what's going on. We have to figure out how to fight. We have to like they're really in survival mode right now. Except for Elzar, who is taking time out for his romantic philosophy. Which he needs to do in order to be the strongest, best Jedi that he can be in order to survive and, join in the fight in a way that is more suited to Elzar Mann. Because he's really the only one of the main Jedi who are in temptation: Elzar, Avar, Bell, Burry, and Vernestra. I think that's all of them. Except for Elzar, the rest of them know how to be part of the fight, at least on a like what they're good at and where they should be helping. That's not to say that Burry certainly doesn't have a lot figured out when it comes to his relationship with the Force and with his trauma and how to move past that. And the nameless are extra upsetting to him, but he knows how to be on the front line, so to speak. And Bell knows, even when he's like struggling still with his like revenge needs and like trauma all the way back from before Starlight. Bell's biggest trauma arguably was pre-Starlight. And then Vernestra has been through it, and so she knows exactly what she wants, to the point of telling the council, this is what I'm going to do, politely. And then Avar figured it out. George did that, like in Eye of Darkness. He really gave Avar a very complete journey where she, went off and figured out, no, this is what I need to be doing. This is where I actually am best as a fighter. And so Elzar is the only one who's still like, I'm trying to do what Stellan would do. And he needs to realize that he's not Stellan and he can't do what Stellan would do. And that's okay. He needs to do what Elzar can do. So, yeah. Oh, Elzar, big man.
You gotta love him. You gotta love him.
Yeah. A lot of people do not have to love
him. Well, speaking of people who do love him, we obviously mentioned Avar a lot here. And for me, I think there are a lot of elements of Avar's story over phase 1 and in Eye of Darkness that for me actually mirrored Elzar in a way, albeit with completely different starting points and impact on her character development. So going from, we've already said it, like the golden child of the Jedi in this era, the hero of Hetzal, to then, abandoning her responsibilities as the Marshal of Starlight, going after the Drengir, obsessing over them, and then coming to the point where she almost kills Lorna Dee in cold blood. And one of the things that I found really interesting about Avar in Eye of Darkness, given that she almost killed Lorna D, was actually how she really makes a point of not killing in the Eye of Darkness. All the way throughout, she's doing everything she can to fight back without killing and without becoming a monster like the Nile. But how, in your opinion, how else has Avar developed since we first met her in Light of the Jedi?
I do think that she is, one of her strengths. She's always been a warrior. Particularly of the three of them, she's the fighter, and she knows that now. I think she's probably always known that, which is how she gets into situations where she becomes the hero of Hetzel. And that's one thing that a warrior does would be to go off after the Drengir. And I think that one of the biggest lessons or like realizations she's had is that it's that actually she's not a leader. She can lead, but she is not best suited to being the marshal of Starlight. For example, she is suited to, like boots on the ground, going and running and leading missions, things like that, that, the admiral doesn't get to do, or the, council member rarely gets to do. And so I think that is a really important part of her arc overall that, of course, comes to a head in Eye of Darkness, when she has to realize, what she can be doing, and that, she can help other people without running the risk of taking over as leader. Just because she knows what to do doesn't mean that she should be the one deciding what to do. And I think that is really important and big for her. And she's, essentially fine in temptation. Like, a lot of upsetting things happen, and, there's lots of fights, and, nobody's fine in the face of the Nameless. But, she starts off in temptation knowing who she is, what she wants, and what she needs to do, what role she needs to play in this. And so, she's in a really confident place because I think of everything that she's learned the hard way. I do think she's still, if she has to face Lorna again, for example, like there's still a lot of, room for her to have big emotional reactions. It's not like she's like put it all to bed, but she's actually in a pretty healthy way, I think, right now, focused on what she should be doing.
No, I definitely get the sense, even at like the end of Eye of Darkness, where she is, she feels like there's a lot of confidence and self-awareness there moving into temptation. And we spoke about kind of Elzar's perspective on their relationship and feelings. How do you think that's changed in the past year from Avar's perspective? Because in phase 1, we saw that she was trying to put a little bit of distance between them. She very much felt those emotions, but there was a little bit of that from her side. Do you think that's changed quite drastically in the year?
I think she's done essentially a 180 when it comes to her, about her feelings. Like what she's gone through, the great anger and grief and desperation that she has experienced. She got through it, and she didn't step over, in a untakebackable way. Fortunately, Kiev was there. Who knows what would have happened? But so that for her, she really has already been through her emotional trials, and feels confident that if she has to face, and when she has to face really hard emotional moments, she can. And so she's not afraid of her big emotions anymore because she has seen the whole journey of like going through that kind of traumatic thing. So when it comes to Elzar, I think she's like, well, I don't have to be afraid of this either. I'm not afraid of my anger. I'm not afraid of my grief. I'm not afraid of my fear. So I'm not going to be afraid of love either. I should write that down. That's not a line in the book. It should have been a line in the book.
I feel like we're getting so deep here. Like speaking to my soul. I'm loving it. And we've mentioned Stellan a lot as well already. How and again we've seen Elzar's perspective on that kind of dynamic shift in the trio. Do you feel like Avar is noticing any dynamic shift now that she's reunited with Elzar, and do you feel like she's kind of seeing a bit of a hole where Stellan was?
Yes, but I also think that the way that she imagines the Force, the way she understands and experiences the Force, and the place that she's gotten to with her emotions, she knows, there's no such thing as a whole, as long as, she and Elzar and, even Vernestra and other people who knew Stellan, as long as, they're still in relationship, there's still, Stellan there. And, she, with her music, she can still feel Stellan's melody, in the Force. And so I think that she misses him, her friend, but that it's not a wound for her anymore.
What a beautiful way of putting it, because like that's so true in real life as well, isn't it? Like as long as you keep someone's memory alive, they're still there with you. And I definitely get that sense reading through.
And it can, it still hurts, but once you can get to that point with a great grief where it's like, okay, this hurts and that's okay, as opposed to this hurts and I cannot even function. That's the goal too. This hurts, but it's okay.
What a wonderful way of putting it.